On July 5th of 2023, Meta officially launched Threads, a new text-based social media app positioned as a direct competitor to Twitter. As it was developed by Meta, it started out tightly integrated into the Instagram ecosystem, even requiring an Instagram account to sign up. Meta's purpose for Threads was a quote-unquote positive and friendly space for public conversation, meant to contrast with the increasingly chaotic reputation Twitter had developed under Elon Musk's ownership. This was around the time where many Twitter users would complain that Twitter felt like it was in the middle of an identity crisis, and were frustrated by the constant feature changes, content moderation policy rollbacks, and Elon Musk's seemingly irrational decision-making. Twitter had also just introduced temporary rate limits to restrict how many posts a user could view per day, which, as you may guess, triggered massive backlash. Meta saw the opportunity and accelerated the launch schedule. Threads went live in more than 100 countries, excluding the EU due to privacy concerns, just days after Elon Musk's latest Twitter policy shift. The app's launch was very quick, mainly due to its connection to Instagram. Threads users could instantly import their Instagram bios and profile pictures, and more importantly, auto-follow existing Instagram accounts who had also joined Threads. This made transferring over feel very smooth, allowing Threads to bypass the usual cold start problem faced by new platforms. Within just 5 days, Threads reached 100 million users, making it the fastest growing consumer app in history at the time, surpassing the previous record held by ChatGPT. Zuckerberg also posted actively on Threads to promote the launch and even took public jabs at Elon Musk, joking about a potential cage match between the two. Many early users included celebrities, brands, and influencers who were automatically given priority placement on the platform. So people like Oprah, Gordon Ramsay, Shakira, and brands like Netflix and Nike were prominently featured in user feeds within hours of the app's launch. Journalists and media outlets also jumped in, such as The Washington Post, The Verge, and CNN, for example, who all set up official accounts and began live posting during the first few days. All of this to say that the launch of Threads was super coordinated and planned out, with the plan being to simply create an Instagram-like version of Twitter and hopefully overtake the original app. But what actually happened? Despite all the hype, the app shipped without several very basic features users expected. You could not send direct messages, there were no trending topics, no hashtags, and no chronological feed. For whatever reason, posts couldn't be edited or scheduled, the app had no desktop support and was mobile only. Additionally, the feed users saw was algorithm-driven and included a mix of people they followed, but also people they didn't, and brand posts, with no way to filter or sort it. Because of this, many users complained that their feeds were full of irrelevant content from people they didn't follow nor care about. A big appeal of Twitter were the organically developed strong subcultures, right? Like the academic Twitter, anime Twitter, tech Twitter, and political Twitter, just to name a few, as well as the many other niche sections. Threads, however, while copying the style of Twitter, launched with no real culture and seemed to make no effort to promote it. There were no communities, no subreddit-style spaces, and no proper way to find niche topics. And because hashtags didn't work at launch, there was no real proper way for smaller creators to promote their posts in appropriate niches. This absence of common features and structures, especially when combined with the app's aggressive promotion of celebrity content, made Threads feel very empty and shallow. It seemed to only copy Twitter at the external level without actually understanding what made the app feel useful for people. And this isn't just my opinion, right? The engagement levels quickly reflected that. While people were very curious and many signed up to explore the app initially, the lack of a clear culture or just purpose of the app made it hard to know what to do after making one post. Many users logged in, posted something generic like, trying this out, scrolled for like a few minutes, and then left. But the platform's dumbest design flaw was that it was too connected to Instagram. At launch, deleting your Threads account meant deleting your linked Instagram account as well. This obviously caused immediate backlash from users who had tried the app and wanted to leave, but who obviously didn't want to lose their years of photos and DMs on Instagram. Meta later promised to decouple the two accounts, but this would shake up the launch of Threads even further. By the end of July 2023, just weeks after Threads' record-breaking launch, the daily active users count dropped dramatically, from roughly 49 million at its peak to just under 10 million within a month. According to data from SimilarWeb, the average time spent on the app also fell from a daily 21 minutes per user to now just 3 minutes. This of course shows that Threads had a clear retention problem. Nearly all users who had signed up had only been on Threads once and haven't revisited it since. The data also shows that a whopping 56% of users quit Threads on the first page, a very massive number compared to the 30% rate of Instagram. The novelty of the initial launch wore off very quickly, and the app lacked the proper reason for users to even stay. I briefly mentioned the feed of Threads being a poor user experience, but let's touch on that a bit more. Because for a content-based app, the content you see on the app is obviously very important, and the irregular feed is what threw off every standard consumer. Users had little to no control over what they saw or even wanted to see. The app also lacked a chronological timeline, which meant that posts from hours or even days ago, which users would want to see, were mixed in with irrelevant content from people who the users didn't even follow. Meta algorithm tried to push celebrity and brand content to fill the gaps, but for average users, this just made the app feel even less personal. And this is exactly what made platforms like Twitter or Reddit work, because people would much rather engage in communities around shared interest than around like Dua Lipa or whatever. Threads being new was a solid excuse for this, but it lacked any features that could let people start little groups and sub-interests, which, like I said, was a heavy reason people enjoyed using Twitter. And to top everything off, the calmer nature of Threads made high-profile accounts begin to post less frequently, as the lack of real arguments and forbidden language removed a lot of excitement from debates, which made engaging feel pointless for users. Many influencers who were active within the first few days would just end up quietly quitting within a week. Public figures who would use Twitter to engage in news, politics, or debates found Threads to be way too sanitized. Meta's content moderation, which was imported directly from Instagram, was just way too strict. Posts that included partial nudity, quote-unquote misinformation, or even just controversial political takes were either given lower engagement or were removed entirely. For many users migrating from Twitter, especially those from the more politically active areas of the app, the biggest problem was that it felt like they needed to engage in a specific way without being able to defend their own points, which is what makes Twitter so fun. And unlike Twitter, where Elon Musk had loosened moderation to promote what he called free speech, Threads enforced more rigid community guidelines. This once again helped maintain a brand-safe environment for celebrities, but at the clear cost of real public conversation. All of this combined shows a very big problem Threads had from the beginning, which was the lack of a real purpose. It looked like Twitter, but behaved like Instagram, and because both have different reasons to be used, the two would just kind of cancel each other out. Threads simply didn't have trending topics, and there was no way to see what the world was collectively talking about. Meta later introduced a basic trending module in the app, but even that was made based on a specific algorithm and not on real-time or user-driven engagement. But even by the time these features rolled out, interest had already tanked. Another challenge was international availability. Because Threads relied heavily on Instagram's user data, Meta delayed the app's launch in the European Union due to privacy compliance issues with the Digital Markets Act. The European Union regulators were especially concerned about the way Meta linked users' behavior across Instagram and Threads without clear user control. The automatic follow feature specifically, where Threads would suggest you follow all your Instagram contacts, was seen as, for some reason, invasive. European users had to sit out the initial wave, and by the time Meta addressed some of the regulatory issues, the hype had mostly already passed. Threads, however, was still being worked on, with Mark Zuckerberg claiming that they had expected this big initial wave to settle down, and that continuing to work on the app would allow it to slowly build its own unique user base and history, just like Twitter or Reddit. However, many believe this to be a complete sham, especially with updates that seemed to only aim at regaining the initial relevance. Web access was finally added so that users could browse Threads from a desktop, a chronological feed option was finally introduced for those who only wanted to see posts from people they followed, and they even began testing hashtags and various search improvements. But each update felt like it was arriving late, and like it only came out because users were complaining for a while. Unlike Twitter, where users organically developed posting norms over the years, Threads felt like it was being patched in real time to try and become Twitter without understanding what made it stand out. Or in other words, every update seemed to fix something that should have been like that from the very beginning. This made a very bad image for Threads, as seemingly even Meta didn't know what to fully do with it. By early 2024, it was very clear that Threads had failed to maintain its momentum. Despite multiple updates and a large initial user base, the platform struggled to build any real relevance. User activity remained low, most timelines were just filled with irrelevant posts, silent accounts, or mostly ads. Many people would describe Threads as an incomplete app, despite it being publicly available for nearly a year now. Meta still continued to quietly push out quality of life improvements, such as, again, better search tools, hashtag functionality, and more desktop features, but none of it led to any real boost in engagement. People believe that this is because, unlike the app it was trying to copy, Threads never became a hub for real-time conversation for something like general topics. It lacked the real-time news that made Twitter essential during something like breaking news events, sports games, or political debates, even to those who didn't typically use Twitter. The users who had initially tried Threads to get a calmer and more positive experience even ended up returning to Twitter and Reddit, which showed that Threads had no idea what the public actually wanted. The few people who remained active on Threads would note how much of the content felt one-sided. Brands continued posting, influencers occasionally shared little updates, and Meta executives tried to keep the platform alive with the typical corporate optimism. But without a core community culture, there was literally zero incentive for the average person to engage. And almost comically, the feed was still trash and would remain showing posts that felt very disconnected from the user's interests. By mid-2024, multiple tech analysts began openly referring to Threads as a failed experiment. Meta, however, refused to shut it down. They instead quietly maintained it, similar to how Google has left some of its less successful products alive without active promotion. Threads still has millions of registered accounts, but very few active daily users. It's currently one of those apps that you would just open as a habit, scroll for like a couple seconds, and then close without even posting anything. As of 2025, Threads of course still exists, but plays almost no role in shaping any online culture. On the other hand, platforms like Twitter, with all of its controversies, continue to dominate real-time discussion. Reddit maintains strong community engagement. Even Blue Sky, despite being invite-only for most of its existence and seen as a similar friendly alternative to Twitter, has had more visible user movement and chances for engagement than Threads. While the initial claim that Threads would be a friendly alternative to Twitter, that has proven to be untrue. The platform has never managed to figure out what it wanted to be, and it failed to engage anyone while doing so.